I'm Katie,
I'm Garrett.
and I have a surprise for you.
I can't wait.
It is the story of Bob Barker versus Betty White.
You found it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Oh my God, I can't wait.
All right. So this story starts back in 1989. Billy was born in Malaysia and then was, as a young elephant, transported to the LA Zoo and had lived at the LA Zoo from about 1989 his whole life. So in 2007, when he was 24 years old, which doesn't seem right based on math, but that's what this article said, so I don't know. Anyway, maybe it was just that he had spent 24 years at the zoo by 2007.
What year was he born?
89, I believe.
No, 89. In 2007, I was 17. So 89 would be 18.
I don't know. Anyway. Dysfunction junction, folks. I don't know what to tell you.
We don't do math. We aren't math doctors.
Yeah, he was 24 in 2007. That's what I know for sure.
Okay.
But anyway, born in Malaysia and transported to the LA Zoo. Meaning he was not born in activity. In 2007, he was the LA Zoo's only elephant, and spent almost all of his life at the LA Zoo in a pen the size of a small bowling alley.
Oh my God.
Where he was often observed rocking back and forth the way many people do when they need to stim or self-soothe.
No.
And was also observed like dry humping a giant tire that was like in his enclosure. A lawsuit
he didn't have any other elephants.
No. A lawsuit was filed in 2007 alleging the LA Zoo was abusing the elephant based on the size of the enclosure and other things. The activists said that the rocking back and forth and the like dry humping a tire was a sign of stress and trauma, but the zoo claimed that the head bobbing that Billy did was actually in response to seeing his caretakers, and it was like when your dog gets like excited to see you each day.
They're like Stockholm syndrome.
So the zoo said it was a normal habit. I don't know how humping an old tire can be a habit that's normal, but I don't know. I haven't seen Cars in a long time, so
what about Cars 3?
Maybe that's what's in Cars 3. Extended cut.
No, then he eats the tire. That's what
So a group of concerned citizens petitioned the city of LA to send Billy to retire, quote unquote, to a 2,300 acre sanctuary in Northern California. The zoo countered this by explaining that the plans were already underway to build Billy a new enclosure that they had named the Pachyderm Forest.
Oh my God, just let him retire.
Well, part of the debate is kind of similar to like what we saw around SeaWorld a few years ago, where one of the reasons that zoos and aquariums are important is that they allow regular people to see wildlife and understand how those fit into the global climate and ecosystems that they're a part of in the wild, and to help conservation efforts like the New England Aquarium comes to mind because they have a lot of like harbor seals that they like kind of like treat if they can't go back into the wild right away.
Yeah, they have Myrtle, the big sea turtle that was injured.
Yes.
That lives there.
And yeah, a lot of zoos do have animals that cannot be released into the wild. Right. And we, like, I think kind of societally had this conversation after Tiger King came out because,
right.
I mean, not that I agree with Joe Exotic's perspective because I don't think he's honest, but his take was that none
of his eyebrow ring that's hanging on for dear life. Do you agree with that?
I do not agree with that because it reminds me of like a partially circumcised foreskin.
You know what it makes me think of is, and this is really vile.
Tell me.
But now I have to tell you. I just feel like he's probably also got one of those Prince Albert piercings.
Oh, certainly.
And it's definitely also in a similar state of just hanging on by a thread.
I hope they made him take that off in prison. I hope you're not allowed to keep your piercing. Probably not.
Imagine you
it's
would
metal.
be allowed to. Yeah. You're welcome, everybody.
We're healthy. But part of his argument and part of even Carol Baskin's argument is that none of their large cats that they had could ever be released into the wild. So they had to live in these quote unquote zoos or sanctuaries because they couldn't live in the wild.
It literally sounds like abusers making an argument for like the state of their relationship.
Oh, totally. And I think, to the extent that there are people who engage in trafficking exotic animals as pets and then find out that they cannot take care of a 800-pound tiger,
right?
In their residential home,
live in the wild now, but that doesn't mean that they can't be on like in a protected sanctuary where they're not being observed.
Right? No, I don't disagree.
Tricks.
I'm just saying that like the way that a lot of those animals end up in these zoos or sanctuaries on display is because they're confiscated by the authorities and then they have to go somewhere or they get destroyed. So that's the option. Those are the two options at that point.
What's his name was doing? Doc
Antle. Yeah. Allegedly. Anyway. So among LA City Council members, because the LA Zoo is owned by the city of Los Angeles, debate was waged over whether denying people the ability to see animals at a zoo was elitist, with one member noting, quote, "Not everyone is rich enough to go on an African safari to see these animals in the wild," in response to another city council member saying that when he went on an African safari and saw them in the wild, that like it convinced him that they should never be kept behind, in cages or whatever. And so his response was like, well, not everyone can go on a fucking safari, dude. Right. Like, what the hell? Like, yeah, it'd be cool if we could all just go on a collective field trip. Like, but what the fuck? So enter Betty White, stage right. Betty White said that the campaign to, quote, free, not really free because he couldn't be reintroduced into the wild, but and Billy is an Asian elephant for context. Asian elephants are the ones with smaller ears, if you're trying to tell the difference. Asian elephants are also frequently seen with that kind of like light or like pink skin on their foreheads and noses with like spotting. Just because they're not in the sun as much, so they don't need it. They live in rainforest environments in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Whereas the elephants in Africa need the big ears because their blood vessels go through their ears and it cools off their body temperature. Yeah.
I love elephants. They're so majestic.
So Betty White actually wrote an article for the zoo's quarterly magazine and basically said that the campaign to free him, where they weren't really freeing him, they were just transporting him to a sanctuary where no one could learn from him or observe him, was, quote, the opening salvo of a larger battle, and wrote in the magazine, quote, "It will not stop with the elephants. Giraffes will be next. If they win this battle, they will not stop until zoos themselves are extinct." One of the articles I read was basically saying that the argument over elephants in captivity was really an argument about the ethics of breeding captive animals, which a lot of zoos do because a lot of these animals are endangered and on the brink of genuine extinction. But one of the articles I read argued that the captive breeding program was flourishing just in response to the laws of supply and demand, and it was basically monetizing extinction. So there was no incentive to maintain wild population levels if you could force creation, or force procreation in a controlled scientific setting, behind zoo walls. But the driving force behind the pressure on the LA Zoo to figure its shit out had been a woman named Catherine Doyle, who was the director of science, research, and advocacy at the Performing Animals Welfare Society, aka PAWS, which is the sanctuary in Northern California that people wanted Billy to be moved to. PAWS executives like Doyle traveled around the country trying to persuade zoos to send elephants to PAWS or to the only other elephant sanctuary in the US that was located in Tennessee. And now we get to Bob Barker, who provided several millions of dollars to PAWS during his life to pay for the airlifting of zoo elephants to sanctuaries and paying for the housing and feeding of those elephants once they arrived.
They airlift them?
Yeah, if they're like too far away.
Oh shit. Like
yeah.
with a
like
plane?
Operation Dumbo Drop, like literally. Hopefully less parachutes.
In my head I was like picturing the ears flapping.
So Doyle would give these presentations, and part of her presentation said one set of statistics she frequently cited is that the natural lifespan of elephants in the wild is 70 years. African elephants average 33 years, and Asian elephants average 44 years in zoos, where they suffer from diseases such as herpes, tuberculosis, obesity, and arthritis, not to mention mental problems. Quote, Billy's not the only elephant who rocks back and forth, Doyle told me. Quote, you see the same stereotypical behavior all across the country. I've even heard of elephants self-mutilating. It gets so bad sometimes they have to be put on Thorazine.
Oh my god.
I can't imagine what an elephant dose of Thorazine looks like, by the way.
Oh my god.
But the zoo's response to this was that the 70-year lifespan was based on a, quote, ideal world situation. And once you factor in that 35,000 elephants per year are killed by poachers, the lifespan of a wild elephant averages out to about 40 years too. So I kind of find this similar to people who say that the average lifespan in the Middle Ages is 35, but it wasn't.
Because it's like average, not median.
Right. Like,
yeah.
Like if it was actually 35, then like nothing would have ever gotten done.
Right.
The Middle Ages weren't delightful by any measure, but people regularly lived into their 60s and 70s. It was just a question of if you could survive infancy, and if you were a woman, if you could survive childbirth.
Right.
That reduced the average life expectancy. So it wasn't really that, you know, you hit 35 and you're a geriatric.
Right.
So that being said, though, like if that were the case, you would think that the zoo lifespan would be higher than the wild lifespan. So
right.
It was kind of that thing where I was like, I mean, the zoo was like, you have to put it in context. And I was like, look, I get what you're saying, but like also
poachers isn't the best context.
Right. Like, shouldn't your numbers still be higher then? Because there's no poachers in a zoo, I think.
Right. And also like, I'm pretty sure.
Harambe, but.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that elephants in the wild are probably not self-harming.
I mean, I haven't seen it in a documentary. I've seen, you know, elephants that will, particularly a mother elephant, if their baby passes away, they'll like drag the body around.
Oh my god. They're like super emotionally intelligent.
Yes, which is another one of the arguments of like, this is why we're seeing this type of behavior in them where they're like rocking back and forth and they're not coping.
Right.
Like, you know, a giraffe might, or, you know, something that doesn't have that same kind of emotional intelligence.
I mean, look at their brain size. An elephant's got a gigantic brain. And it's just like, I mean, I think it's definitely one of those debates where there's like no good answer. I mean, I personally am not a fan of a zoo, and I've been called a fucking commie for it.
Yes, well, you
direct quote. The reason for that, because it is you
one
keep
of those
complaining
things. But you're sitting there in your like sickle and hammer shirt, and
it does kind of look like that, doesn't it?
It actually does.
But as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, that's a fair point. It does kind of look like that's what I'm wearing. I think it's not so much like I mean, my view is definitely like there are obviously animals who, for a list of reasons, can't be like in a truly wild setting, or are super endangered and otherwise would be extinct because humans are trash. But I think the being on display thing is just kind of like icky feeling to me.
Mhm.
I just think about like how shitty it must be to live in like this little area with people staring at you all day and yelling and gawking, and
Mhm.
because I think animals in general have more emotional capacity than previously thought.
Oh,
So the thought
sure.
of living that life is horrible. It's kind of like when we were watching Madagascar last night and they woke up inside crates and
Yes.
all of us were like,
It's true. Yeah. No, that was very jarring and horrifying because
yep, didn't love that.
yeah.
But anyway,
One of the other arguments in favor of moving Billy to the sanctuary was economics. The new enclosure, quote, the pachyderm forest, which they ended up calling the Elephants in Asia exhibit, I think, would ultimately cost taxpayers $42 million to build.
damn.
And they were building it at a time that the city of LA was cutting services to avoid bankruptcy.
Oh my
So,
god.
whereas
This
I
is
saw
just, and then
something
it
that I
gets
think
worse.
basically like Bob Barker, Cher, Lily Tomlin had all pledged enough money that they had at least covered 1.5 million to move him there and then like pay for his first year of food. So it was like, and so like it just wasn't like a taxpayer burden. In the wild, according to a 2014 article I read, elephants are being killed by poachers at a rate of one every 15 minutes. And many zoos do support conservation efforts because people go to the
Right.
zoo to see the endangered species.
Right.
Um, and one of the articles I read, and it's something that I hadn't considered, but conservation efforts also include teaching people who live in areas with wild elephants or whatever animal to how to grow and protect their crops without having to kill the native animals. One of the projects was teaching farmers in Cameroon how to grow crops that and keep elephants away without having to kill the elephants or harm them. Um, but that's like a part of conservation and like, you know, living within your ecosystem, you know, in a symbiotic kind of way.
Right.
But the way that, you know, people can fund that is by going to these research institutions that have these animals kind of on display for you to see them. And I think there is something to be said for the idea, like especially for children and kind of piquing their interest in wildlife and conservation efforts. You know, there is like an object permanence thing, and you need to be able to kind of like, I know that I need to see something like IRL to really understand its size, like
Especially something like an elephant.
yeah, like even, you know, I'll regular I'll regularly look up like how big a whale is, and like there's all those diagrams on Google where they show like a human like swimming next to it, and it's not good enough for me
Yeah.
because it's not like a 3D image. It's not
Right.
like the stills or videos of people like scuba diving or snorkeling in the ocean next to a whale are perfect because I can like really see how a moving human looks
Right.
next to the
It gives
moving
you a much
animal.
better idea of scale
Right.
than just a little picture.
So I'm sure like I'm sure that that's the case also for kids where you're like, holy cow, like this thing is huge.
Right.
And, you know, you can feed it, you know, like hold out a branch and the giraffe or the elephant will eat the cabbage out of your hand or something.
Or if you're a 4-year-old Garrett holding out peanuts for the elephant and then it drools all the way down your arm from its trunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or you get eaten by a goat like I did.
Yeah.
Um
Less endangered, but yes.
less endangered. So the LA Zoo though also wanted to breed Billy because apparently of the 138 African and Asian elephants in North America, less than half of them are fertile in any way. And we don't know why elephants in captivity lose their fertility.
I
Male
wonder if it could
elephants
be
in particular
stress.
Male elephants in particular tend to suffer from low libido and or diminished sperm counts.
Oh my god, this
Um
is so sad.
yeah. So before the new enclosure was even finished, a call had already gone out to find Billy a mate, and staff had begun training him to stand on his hind legs. This is a horrifying fact, but I had to include it. Had begun training him to stand on his hind legs so he would know what to do when she arrived. What's more, Billy was being prepped for sperm collection which is generally accomplished by inserting one's arm into an elephant's anus and massaging his prostate until he ejaculates. If that doesn't work, a rubber elephant vagina can be used, but these can be cumbersome.
I need a quick timeout here. So you're telling me
They milk the prostate, yes.
God, I cannot wait for him to edit this episode.
He will die.
Can you imagine, like, I'm picturing some, small business that manufactures, like fake silicone human vaginas, getting a call from somebody with a PhD and being like, I work for the LA Zoo and I wanted to know if you could make me a giant fake elephant vagina to scale.
My bigger concern is that they had to get the plaster mold of the elephant vagina from somewhere.
But then also, how how long is an elephant dong? So we have to then be
It's
able to accommodate.
prehensile. Have you seen the
No.
videos of it? It
No.
first of all, big enough to drag on the ground when not erect. Huge, like 2 feet long. And then also they can like literally control it and will like scratch their tums with it.
So 2 points.
It's like it's an extra trunk, literally a second trunk.
One, I'm really glad that human men do not have prehensile penises.
Can you imagine?
That's point one. Point two is a slight side note that one of our Patreons and I, back in college, went through a period of time where we had this very weird competition over who could find the grosser animal mating video on YouTube.
Did I just win your contest?
Somehow elephants did not come up. I think I won with slugs. At one point, the Patreon almost won with hedgehogs, but I think I won with slugs because that was really disgusting and upsetting to see. But there was no prehensile penises in that. So yeah, I'm pretty not loving these elephant facts. I'll take the ear facts all day over this.
According to the Google machine, there's a good reason for elephants to have prehensile penises. It's hard enough for a 6-ton animal to get into the right position for sex, let alone having to do the rhythmic thrusting that's required. So he lets his penis do all the work for him.
So it just
I guess
pumps on its own.
Yeah, like a let me see here. Here you go. I'm sending you a link in the chat to Reddit that has a video on it.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, like it literally just curls up and scratches his belly button. Yeah, it itched there,
The top comment, I knew that was his dick. I know what prehensile means. I understood when the title said he could scratch his belly with it. Somehow none of that prepared me for accurate. Wow. I was really not expecting to learn so much about elephant penises today.
I'll include the link to that Reddit post in the show notes for this post.
Yeah, you definitely should, because that was That was really a lot. That was really something else.
Yeah. So anyway, they had put out this call to find him a mate, and got him his rubber vagina to practice on, and they were trying to, because most female elephants are artificially inseminated. Because this article I was reading started off by talking to this guy who goes around like Africa in a helicopter and darts these elephants so that then they can milk their prostate while they're unconscious and harvest their semen from wild elephants to then go use in these captive elephants. It was a wild article.
So this guy's job
Yes.
is to fly around in a helicopter and date rape male elephants.
Yes.
Can you
He's
imagine
stealing their seed?
Waking up and being like, what the fuck just happened?
Why am I so tired?
Why does my butt feel weird? Oh my god. This is so horrifying.
Additionally, other opponents of the LA Zoo's plan for the new enclosure said that price tag, the $42 million, could actually help endangered elephants, with one person noting that he bought 1 million acres of land in Cambodia, which is in Southeast Asia, for $250,000. And the LA Zoo could have used that $42 million price tag for the pachyderm forest to buy 100 square miles of land that, quote, would have protected the elephants in perpetuity. So in addition to like the economic impact of just being like, yo, that's like taxpayer dollars.
Right. Yeah.
Like whatever. So anyway, this lawsuit was filed in 2007. The trial didn't start until 2012. After the new enclosure was already built and he was living in it. There's like an interesting discussion on like what happened in the trial. Basically, the zoo's, quote, expert witnesses were just the elephant's handlers, and like they were useless when asked about like how elephants in captivity develop arthritis in their feet because they're walking on ground that gets so compacted, because that's the only ground they have to walk on. They were like, no, we rototill the enclosure like every other day so that doesn't happen. And they were like, okay, well, when was the last time you rototilled the new enclosure? And they're like, oh, we haven't yet. And I was like, so you don't
do it every other day.
Right. Like you rototilled the old enclosure that was the size of a bowling alley. Like, okay. Nevertheless, though, the question for the judge was whether the zoo met the legal definition of animal cruelty or negligence. And the judge found that in his decision, quote, all is not well in the Elephants of Asia exhibit at the Los Angeles Zoo, and described the zoo staff as, quote, suffering from an anthropomorphic fantasy that the elephants are happy in captivity. However, he
it's a
did
really
find,
interesting way to phrase that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they also talked with the like chairman of the zoo, this guy whose last name was Lewis, and for this article, and he refused to refer to any of the animals by their like human names and would not anthropomorphize them. And his reason for it was like, it takes away from the fact that like it takes away their animal soul,
right,
to like impose this human thing on them.
Right.
So it was an interesting take, but I also think, you could also see it as like, well, he's also distancing himself because he's refusing to name these critters.
Yeah.
But I can see
like
both sides
that
of that
grows
argument.
up on the farm that isn't allowed to name its favorite cow,
Right. Yeah. I can see both sides of that though. And I think it's an interesting take where it's like, well, no, if you want these to be wild animals that we're not interacting with unless we have to, then why would we give them names? This isn't Bob the monkey.
Right.
Like, so anyway, but regardless, the judge found that the activists had not proven that the zoo met the legal definition of cruelty or negligence in its care for the animals, and therefore the exhibit was not shut down. Billy was allowed to stay at the zoo, and the zoo was just ordered to rototill the soil in the new exhibit and exercise him more. So all of that was happening between 2007 and 2012. But in 2009 is when Bob Barker threatened to boycott the 2009 Game Show Awards, where he was slated to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. And he said he would never show, like he would not go to the award ceremony if Betty White, who was scheduled to deliver a tribute to Mark Goodson, also attended. Mark Goodson is a game show producer who died in 1992, by the way. Betty White agreed to pre-record her remarks so that Barker could receive his award in person, which apparently was enough to keep him happy. So he was fine seeing like a videotape of her just as long as she wasn't actually present. I don't know.
I'm really surprised that she was willing to like accommodate any of that. You know, I would have been tempted to like completely ignore it if it were me.
I think like she's just kind of a nice person, and she's like, it's his Lifetime Achievement Award. Like, I'm not going to take it away from him because he's mad that I wrote this article saying, and granted, I didn't read the whole article that she wrote. She, I think, if I had to guess, was making those same arguments of like, these zoos help with conservation and they help people understand these animals and yada yada. And if we don't have zoos at all, like people just won't learn about these animals. There's no context for them to see them. So I think she probably understood that they were just on different sides of the same conservation coin.
Yeah.
So that's the story of Bob Barker and Betty White. Old people. I wrote old people who lived on opposite sides of the same conservationist and animal activist coin. Old as fuck people who I think both were just trying to do what was best with different opinions on what long-term success looked like for those animals. In December 2022, it's not
like one of them was like, kill him.
Right. Yeah, no. And she did a lot of work with animal conservation things as well. Like, I mean, she didn't have a Sea Shepherd boat named after her, but she did do a lot of work with conservationist issues. So I don't think that, like I said, I don't think that she was coming from a place of malice or like, how will my children ever see an elephant? Like, she's one of those people who could go to a safari without any issue.
Right.
So I think, you know, also I think Bob Barker is used to getting what he wanted. And, you know, he was a man in Hollywood through the 70s and 80s and 90s and wasn't used to hearing no. And certainly, I think probably had some misogyny in him and didn't like that Betty White was a name that people were listening to.
I was really interested when we did the episode on Hugh Hefner being Bob Barker's evil twin, the Dysfunction Junction episode. I thought it was really interesting that Bob Barker would donate money to like law schools to help fund like animal protective education and conservation, and like approaching it from that way I thought was really interesting. Instead of, you know, how many people are like giving money to like PETA or something, as opposed to, I thought the way that he was approaching it was really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was a very dynamic way to approach it, where, you know, it's sort of that thing of like, well, if you want change, like, no one's saying that Bob Barker needs to go to law school, but like, if you need laws written that are making animal cruelty a felony, well, the people who write the laws are the lawyers.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
yeah,
and
like
I feel like
the lawmakers, like the people elected, technically make the laws, but they're not.
But a lot of those people start out in law school.
Yeah.
And even then, I mean, you're also getting a hold of people when maybe their brain is at a less jaded point. You know, people are younger and maybe more open to things.
Way more idealistic when you're in law school, that's for sure. Can confirm.
And even then, like, you compare law school to like other graduate type degrees, and they're probably the least the least idealistic, or one of the lesser idealistic groups of people.
Yeah.
But still you're like reaching people at a point when they might be more receptive to taking on an issue like that. So it's just like very interesting. And I'm it's fascinating to me that these two very, very, very elderly people were beefing over an elephant.
They were farting all over the place. Um, but I do have an update. So in December of 2022, when what I have here, Billy was 37 years old. So I don't know when he was born. Uh, maybe 1985. I don't know. An LA City Council committee voted in favor of relocating Billy to the sanctuary in Northern
Oh,
California. However, after the committee vote, it needed to go to the full council to approve the measure. And I couldn't find out if that happened. Like I tried to see something on the LA Times website, but they wanted me to buy a subscription
I
and I
hate
didn't want
that.
to. And especially because I just needed this one fucking article. It's not like I was on their
Yes.
website like all day.
No,
Whatever.
Rolling Stone did that to me
Ugh,
literally like
so
yesterday
irritating.
afternoon, and I just wanted to scream.
It's
I'm
the
like, this
worst.
article is 6 years old. Nobody's reading it right now. Can you just let me read it, please?
Exactly. Like I'm not looking at today's fucking paper.
Right.
God. So anyway, so if
Fuck
anybody who's
paywalls.
listening knows what happened,
I
if
want to
they
know
ever
what happened
voted
to
on that
Billy.
or whatever, he's still there. I mean, as of December 2022, he was. And they had found a couple female, they were a bonded female pair, which I don't know why they're not calling them lesbians, but whatever.
Yeah, why
They were
can't we just
past,
let them be lesbian elephants?
they were really good friends.
They are roommates for years in
They
a
did each
one
other's hair
bedroom.
every night. One bedroom. But they were both past child or, baby bearing age. And
Mhm.
so when he had been moved into this new enclosure, and then they had to they had to like bifurcate the enclosure because they weren't sure, because he was so horny and had been alone for so long, if he wouldn't like hurt or injure these two elderly elephants who couldn't have any more elephant babies. um so they kept them separated for a really really long time. They're able to be together now, but one of those old lady elephants was like 60. So again, I'm not sure on where they're getting these age estimates from, unless they're again counting in the elephants that die from herpes or whatever. So also, how are they getting herpes? What's going on? Stop
Oh,
stop giving the elephants herpes, you pervy zookeepers. Um,
God.
but
I'm
yeah,
so distressed about all these elephant facts.
yeah. Although I was, as I was doing this, I was thinking like, because I've been to the San Diego Zoo, and that is an excellent zoo. Honestly, like the enclosures are huge from what I could see, and it like animals had places to go where they weren't on display in every
Mhm.
thing. So it was kind of like that scene in Jurassic Park where you're like, oh man, there's nothing to see. But at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, the animal has like, the free will to not be seen if it doesn't want to be seen.
Right.
Um, but I was also thinking about like Steve Irwin and, you know, the Irwin family, and they do all of this conservation work, and they're attached to a zoo, and they work at a zoo, and they do all of this outreach, and they bring animals onto, late night TV shows and stuff like that, and how it gets people interested in
Mm-hmm.
those animals. And I do think that it is important, and it's a question of, doing that in a way that at least does more good than harm. But I think the
Right.
problem with that is that you are asking people to measure the good that you do by your own moral standards and not their own moral standards. And that's how we end up with these like differences of opinion that are kind of hard to reconcile.
And beef between very elderly people.
Yeah, just old beefing.
I'm having just these really intrusive thoughts about this giant silicone elephant vagina.
Yeah, I love that they were like, it's pretty cumbersome. And I'm like, well, yeah, I would imagine you'd have to like tie it to a sex swing sort of situation for the elephant to like go into it.
Or like a giant what are those pommel horses that they use in like gymnastics?
Yes.
Like it's There's just like I'm literally gonna be thinking about this all day now.
That's fair.
Just trying to think about the logistics of this.
Oh, and they did give up trying to harvest his seed, by the way, because it was never successful. Apparently,
They're like, we
he
don't
would
need
just
his.
like
We can just dart a elephant in the wild and
he was
fist
just
his
like,
butt.
they'll fist his butt.
Can you imagine how big the thing has to be to like to diddle his prostate?
I mean, you're putting your whole fucking arm in there. It's like
It's got to be bigger than that.
It
They
says,
do that with a cow. It's their whole arm.
I know, but
An elephant's got to be like you would
I
need
mean,
like
the
a
prostate's
human
not going to
size.
be like in his throat, like it.
No, but I'm just talking like it has to be big.
All right, how big
would
is
have
an
to be,
elephant
like-
prostate?
But like it has to be big enough to be able to stimulate it enough to get them to ejaculate. So I just feel like it would have to be really
Maybe
large.
they just pick the zookeeper with the biggest hands.
Speaking of which, I was joking with the OBGYN's office that I would only be allowing cervical checks on people who I could check their hands first and see who had the smallest hands. Or maybe it was the doula. I was joking with somebody about it. I was like, no cervical checks until I can see their hands.
Their prostate's actually pretty teeny, according to the Google machine. It's like right in the butthole.
Maybe they can stimulate it with an arm.
Yeah.
You see
I would
somebody putting
imagine
on, like waders, like they're going fly fishing.
Oh yeah, I mean it would be like those big arm condoms that they have to wear for cows, but it looks like maybe up to my elbow.
That's it? That's
Yeah.
crazy. I just feel like an elephant beehole should be way bigger than that.
Well, I mean, you're free to let them know. I mean, there's a picture of this beehole. It looks like the size of a bird's nest. And I say that because there's like compacted hay in it right now in this image.
I was like, a bird's nest is such a strange analogy to be using, and all I can think of was it's like a Cheerio, right? Oh my god. Well, that took some turns I was really not expecting. But I'm really glad to get some answers on this fight between Bob Barker and Betty White.
I am so excited for our editor to hear this.
I can't
wait for the text that we're gonna get.
I'm literally gonna stare at him while he's doing it. What do you think?
He's gonna be so mad at me.
Yep. I think he's gonna get more mad about me asking a lot of follow-up questions about elephant vaginas and effectively elephant sex toys.
Yeah. AdamandEve.com /elephant vagina for 40% off.
And
it's not a real promo code. Don't use it.
There's some dude out there who's like, yes, I'm waiting for an elephant vagina.
Oh yeah, but they're gonna end up on My Strange Addiction soon enough.
Probably. I mean, I remember watching a documentary called Zoo about people with bestiality fetishes or kinks or whatever you want to call it. And there was a guy who died after being penetrated by a horse. It perforated his bowel and he died of internal bleeding.
I have heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of that before because we got on the topic of horse shows when I was in college once. And yep.
Well, I wish we could play the song from Bob's Burgers at the end of this when they were doing the Thomas Edison
autopsy with my autopsy
about the elephant. Oh my god. Well, this has been a really entertaining dysfunction junction.
You're welcome.
Extra dysfunctional.
Thanks. I did it for you.
I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did, because
Yeah, it's our second to last dysfunction
lovely.
junction before you go on mat leave.
Oh my god. So close to ejection time.
That was so close to saying ejaculation time. Considering our recent topics, didn't like it. Too close.
Sorry.
Too close to ejaculation.
Sorry.
You were edging it.
No, I was not. My hands were right here. There was no giant elephant beeholes to be found. There was no giant bird's nest beeholes to be found. Oh god, he's gonna be so mad. I can't wait.
All right. Well,
Bye.
bye.